Is there an age limit for your monastic devotees and why? We've never thought of such a question. What we're interested in is that they want to give their life and their time to know God. Yeah. People have, I have known of people coming, well, let's think of Yogananda said his most advanced disciple was Sister Gyanamata. Sister Gyanamata came to Yogananda when she was very old. And often, you see, she was living like she should. So Yogananda never had any need to correct her. He never needed to reprimand her, but he did the other people that needed it. So she noticed, well, they were getting uh, some straight words and talk. And so, but he wasn't to her. And she would say, are you being easy on me because I'm old? Are you not disciplining me because I'm old? And she was the perfect one. She was the ideal one. I remember Brother Mokshananda saying one Sunday morning in a talk that he'd been talking with some of the other disciples that lived with Yoganandaji. And the subject of Gyanamata came up. And they really thought about it, those that had been from the early years when she came onward. And they said that it seemed likely that in all the years she was there and living in Mount Washington, excuse me, in all the years she had lived there in Mount Washington, she had been no more in his presence than 8 hours total. You understand? Years and years, no more than 8 hours, if even 8 hours. Because he wasn't a good luck charm, he wasn't a fetish. He told her what to do, and she did it. And she gained it. This was it exactly. She aspired genuinely, and she got it. So age doesn't mean anything. Youth doesn't mean anything. In many monastic orders, they want you to be old enough so they can get 30 to 40 years work out of you. Also, in many orders, they want you to be young enough so they can rework your mind. And when you're old, you get, as we say, set in your ways. So it doesn't make any difference. But we do have standards and we do have expectations, and frankly, we have demands. So that is there. All right. How to overcome fear and negativity? Well, I'm expanding my commentary on the teachings of Sri Gajanana Maharaj, and I have just been writing about one of the things he says. And he says fearlessness is an absolute necessity. But he also says that fearlessness comes from the japa and meditation of Soham. And I happen to know that's true for myself because way back in my mind, I knew I was messing around for 50 years. I knew those gurus were fake. I knew the yoga was just junk. But I couldn't face it. So there was a dis-ease, not a terrible thing. It was always just kind of there, kind of a not so sure, not so unfocused thing. So by reading about Gajananda Maharaj, I learned about Soham Yoga. And I started doing it. And after 5 minutes, I knew I have found it. I went on for more than 5 minutes, of meditation. And the thing I noticed was that anxiety was gone, that unsureness was gone, and I knew this is the way. And people have written to me trying to gripe about Gajanana Maharaj. I hardly ever met him. Really, I've had people write letters just like spitting on the very image of God or the memory of Gajanana Maharaj. And that's proof there's nothing in this Soham yoga. Well, fool, Soham yoga was brought to the world thousands. Soham yoga was brought to the world thousands and thousands of years before Gajanana Maharaj was born. And the Nat Yogi Sampradaya has proved the reality of that. But back to what matters, you and I. Abhaya, fear, unsureness. And it's not ego based, but you know the sadhana is right. And if I knew that Gajanana Maharaj was insane, well, too bad. It's sad for him. It's unfortunate. But he's not Soham. I am, in a sense, and so are you. So he was Soham, but he wasn't the fountain of it all. Soham is divine consciousness itself, divine awareness itself. In India, they have all kinds of mantras, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Shivaya Namah. They say God and his name are one. Well, that sounds kind of nice. And it's true, the mantras evoke a state of consciousness, and people who use them gain benefit. Absolutely. Never deny that. But Soham is the thing. This has been my experience, and it'll be the experience of anyone who, living a yoga life, takes it up and perseveres. And even Gajanana Maharaj says it won't take you a long, long, long time to find out this is it. But if you don't want it to be it, and there's a lot like that, well then, gripe and fuss and fume, but don't write me any emails about it. Because I'll have my opinion about the source of the email. So then, fear can only be overcome by being established in the self. Then, what is there to fear? Nothing can harm you because you are life and existence itself and your truth itself. And negativity comes from ignorance. And when you practice, you don't become enlightened immediately. You don't become fully wise immediately, but you proceed and you keep the japa and you keep the meditation, and the negativity will go away because it's just a mirage. Your truth, your reality is divine existence. It's divine consciousness. There's a whole section in the Upanishads where someone is teaching another, and he gives similes to Brahman. And at the end of each simile, he says, and you are that. Tattvamasi, you are that. That's what you need to find out. Where does free will fit in this lifetime? Well, if you don't have free will, you're hardly alive. But how are you going to have free will if you're a bound person? If your mind is bound, if the situations are binding you, then what use is your free will? You, if somebody ties you up with around and around with iron chains, you'll have the will to get out, but you're not going to get out because willing, wanting, doesn't do anything in that sense. Yet it says in the Gita, the will is your only friend and the will is your only enemy. Therefore, put forth your will to realize the self. There you have it. This is it. And so you'll never have free will until you're free. And when you're free, you won't need it. I'm not kidding you. All right, fine. Signs of progress during Soham meditation. That I hesitate to say because we're all starting from a different point. We're really all walking different paths. So if someone says to me, what's it going to be like when I walk out my front door and go for a 3 mile walk? I don't know. You see, like you don't know what it'll be like if I go out my door because we're all utterly different. People do experience different things. Some people experience it and some people don't. They don't have experience, but they just keep with it. And then one day things start happening. Other people start and all kinds of things happen. And after a while, they stop happening because you don't need them any longer at that point. I would say progress in Soham meditation is sitting and doing it correctly and doing it for enough time. And then it's going to work. I've just talked about now the abhaya, fearlessness. You know if you're doing it right and if you're really putting in the time, and if your life is lived according to the principles of yama and niyama. You have to lead the pure life of a yogi. Don't work up to it. You'll never get there if you work up to it. You just say, I am from this day forward, and you do those things and you keep those things. And you do it by doing it. I'll tell you an interesting story Sri Ramakrishna had. There was a man whose wife started looking kind of distracted and worried and unhappy. So he said to her, "Oh, why are you so anxious and you really don't seem happy? What is it?" She says, "Well, I'm worried about my brother. He's making very definite and very uh, prolonged preparations to become a sannyasi." And her husband said, "You don't have anything to worry about. Anybody who makes preparations and getting ready will never take up the sadhu life." She said, "Well, I don't understand. What do you mean?" He said, "I'll show you." So he went in the other room. Remember, he was wearing traditional Indian clothes. So he went in the other room and he came back just wearing a what we call a dhoti and perhaps one around the upper part of his body. And nothing else, just some clothes. And he said to her, "From now on, you're as my sister." And he walked out the door. She never saw him again. So it's what you do outside of meditation. It's what you are outside of meditation. It's how you find yourself to be outside of meditation. Inside of meditation, people can lie to themselves completely. I belonged to a yoga cult. It was the bliss path. And they'd all sit there going, but outside meditation, there was no difference between them and the people that were across the street. Nothing had changed in their consciousness. So the idea you see a vision, Swami Bhaktivedanta started the Hare Krishna movement in, I can't think why, but after a while he got so that instead of saying Krishna, Krishna, he'd write Kr dot S dot N dot A. So one time when I gave a satsang, this young girl came, and when it was all over, she came up to me. She didn't have any questions that I recall, but she said to me, I had a vision of Krishna. Now, I don't say this to laugh at her. It wasn't her fault. I had a pretty good idea she hadn't. Because if you can't even say Krishna, chances are you're not going to you're not going to have a vision of Krishna. So there is experience, but there's worthless experience, and there's deluded experience. There's false experiences. And I've known people. I had a friend that thought she talked to Esmeralda, the queen of the fairies. And she used to sit around talking all the time, one-sided conversation, as far as people, other people in the room knew. And she'd even let her food burn on the stove because she and Esmeralda were having a talk. Well, people have a marvelous, marvelous capacity for self-delusion. So outside of meditation should tell you something. Inside meditation, the feeling of abhaya, the feeling of peace, the feeling of no anxiety, and instead of poking around saying, well, have I got there yet? My skin color changed any? I'm going to look dark like Krishna. If instead you're just immersed in the repetition of Soham in time with your breath, so when you inhale, hum when you exhale, and it's a natural breath, spontaneous, and you don't say Soham, you say Soham. And you're doing it, well, it ought to satisfy you and start satisfying you right away, for one thing. And Soham will teach you all about itself. Believe me. Like you won't need a lot of pep talks about it. It will absolutely show you the way. And you can say this. See, Gajanan Maharaj said, Soham is the only savior. That's really pretty intense. And it sounds incredibly narrow minded. But he talks about this and he says, this is it. Well, personally, I knew I was on the right track. Like I say, after 5 minutes, though I kept on meditating. But then after some days, I realized, well, this is the thing. And you'll know. You know. You'll feel assured. You have no worry. Of course, a lot of bigots have no worry about the crazy things they think. So there's no way you and you alone are ever going to know the way it works. Okay, sorry, I looked at that one. Oh, yes, the Sermon on the Mount, its inner meaning. If you look at the website and do a search on the Sermon on the Mount, I have written a commentary because that's such a big subject. I can't even begin it. But it's the right question, and it's certainly the right subject. What happens to the soul after death? I'm not trying to be cute or smart aleck, but I always say to people who ask me that question, and people do, it's a very logical question, it's a very reasonable question. What happens to you after birth? When the soul comes in, it's born, what happens to it? Well, the answer is everybody is completely different. And if you understand karma, you understand what happens is all according to their karma. So after death is the same story. You will go to that level of existence, and there are thousands of worlds. In Indian cosmology, sometimes they'll just set forth a smaller number than that. But basically, there are tiny gradations. And there are thousands of worlds. And it's a matter of magnetism. It won't be, you deserve to go to this good world. Oh, you deserve to go to that not so good world. No, no, no. The whole vibration of your mind and your life and your karma, everything about you, its key vibration, its prevailing, predominant vibration will take you right to the world that is exactly suited for you and for your development, hopefully. It may be an unpleasant world, but that's what you need, like in this world, when your karma has unhappy things happen to you. And that's what determines it. Now, Krishna says what you're thinking of at the very time of death. But see, he isn't just meaning before you go unconscious. It's what you're actually thinking of, and deep in you, you're still thinking of. You'll go to that. So the people who they die saying, "What am I going to do? So and so has such a problem," and they die with that on their mind. Well, they're going to come back and be born. I don't know where they're going to come for a while, but they're going to go to a world very like this world. There are worlds that people enter them, and it's a long time before they realize they're dead. Sometimes they don't know they're dead. They kind of feel kind of odd. They don't quite remember their life before they got there, but they just manage somehow. So you see, because you die when you're in the astral world, you die, you come back here, you die here, you go to the astral world or the causal world. So that's completely up to you. Literally, literally up to you. What you have made of yourself, and you can't give an excuse about others making you anything. What you've made of yourself is exactly what will determine what happens to you after death. There are people, they live unconsciously. They don't think about God. They don't act like they have a soul. They just live in a little tiny, their life's a little hamster wheel. They just run in it. And they don't even have much aspirations for anything, not even materially. And they just kind of, mosey along and they die. They go to sleep. It takes some degree of evolution to be born as a human, and it all takes some degree of evolution to, in the world, be awake and objective and know you're an individual and see what it is where you are. So believe me, a lot of people, when they die, they just fall asleep. And it may be 200 years, but they'll be asleep and it'll be perfect dreamless sleep. So there's no sense of time passing. And then one day somebody's going to smack them on the rear end when their body's been brought out of the womb and they're going to start crying and they're back here. But in between, unconsciousness. This I've witnessed for myself. Of course, you don't know that I'm telling you the truth, and you can assume I'm crazy. But I have seen people who, after death, were just totally asleep. Totally asleep. And there's a little more about the experiences I saw, but let's not go into that. So, what happens to you after death is exactly what you set yourself to be. If you buy a ticket to fly to South America, you're going to go there, not to Greenland. And that's one of the reasons why life in this world and in other worlds are so important to experience and look at and say, okay, where I am is what I am. I remember saying that to one of these super social action people. I said, where someone is what they are. And of course, she didn't like that because she wanted to interfere in their lives and have them be something different and therefore be different. How is reincarnation justified if we can't remember past lives and their mistakes? Well, do you remember your first month in life? Do you remember the first year of your life? How much do you remember of it? Is that illegitimate? You can't say that you were alive and it isn't justified because you don't remember. Think of all the things you've forgotten, in life. It all goes away. So you don't remember everything you ever learned. You don't remember everything you ever saw. You don't remember everything you ever said. So that's not justified your past life. And to say I don't remember is the dumbest argument against reincarnation there is. And I know because I said it. If I've lived before, then why don't I remember? Well, somebody should have said, well, because you're stupid, you see. And also because you were dumb enough to come back here and you got your memory is in your brain and you had a new brain, you had a new body. Now, the truth is you brought in an astral brain and a subtle brain, but you're not going to believe that either. So chances are nobody will tell you. But how would you remember it? I knew a very, very intelligent woman who had no memory of her life before the age of 5. That means she hadn't lived. So it's pointless. Besides, there's such thing as past life recall, and people do remember it. I was fortunate enough to know Dr. Morris Netherton, who formulated past lives therapy. In fact, there's a book he wrote on it, not telling you how to do it, but about his experiences with the therapy as he worked with it. And people then did remember. Yes, you can remember your past lives. When I was practicing yoga, even just fringe area yoga, nothing like Soham sadhana, very often when I came to a real point that was important in my life, I'd have a past life memory. And that memory would show me why that I was at the point I was, and I could figure out the way to go on from it. But I never found there was just willy-nilly, woke up one day and remember I had a conversation with Abraham Lincoln in a previous life. It all had a purpose. It all had a value. It all meant something. I had a very great yogi tell me to go see a movie, one of the very popular movies, pretty violent movie actually, and said to me, now I really mean this because I was thinking, are you kidding me? But the yogi said, I really mean this. You should go see that movie. and I decided I'm not going to do it. But the cosmos and my karma, and perhaps the yogi's blessing, was with me, so that a friend of mine came to visit, and we talked a bit, and he said, I've really heard about this movie. And my sister went to see it and said it was really good. And I noticed it's playing at the theater that's just around the corner from here. So why don't we go see it? So I said, oh, well, I sat there and remembered an entire past life. And it explained many things in this life and what happened to me in this life, even people I'd encountered in this life. And well, there you are. So it happened, but it would not have happened if I hadn't been a yogi. And if you need to remember, you will. And if you don't need to remember, you won't. And frankly, who cares about your past mistakes? The problem is for you not to make any future mistakes. And believe me, sadhana will help in that very, very much. All right. The myth of the churning of the ocean of milk. Don't think I'm laughing at the question. It's just, you see, it's something that's so completely out of normal American experience, or the idea that this would be found in a scripture is why I'm laughing. Is it valuable to study this myth as a metaphor for our spiritual evolution? Is it relevant to a non-Hindu? Okay. All right, here's the myth. That in the beginning there was a great ocean of milk. Now, think about it. If in the beginning there was a big ocean of milk, where were the cows? It was an ocean of light, you see. See, there is a whole body of scriptures in India called the Puranas. Purana just means ancient, very old. And because there are histories in the Puranas. Now, there's sublime wisdom in the Puranas, and there's just crazy barking nonsense also in the Puranas. It can depend on which Purana. But in all of them, there's a mixture of just fairy tale and then profound wisdom. Sometimes the story is moronic, but it'll say, and then the great sage so and it gives a prayer, and the prayer contains incredible wisdom. Don't ask me why this is the way it is. I guess it's the karma of the human race. But anyway, there was an ocean of milk, it says. And the gods churned the ocean. And out of the ocean didn't come butter, but it came all kinds of divine beings and great beings, deities, gods, and other things. And it is, of course, the mind is the milk ocean. The devas are our faculties, our senses, and our will, by which we churn the ocean of our mental Shakti, our mind energy, Manasa Shakti. And arising from that comes wisdom. Now, wisdom can come in many forms. Just an idea, suddenly an insight. Why, that's what that means. It can mean a picture, a symbol, and you figure out the symbol. Or an event, or you see like a movie unwinding, and then you figure out what it means. But most of all, you see, the butter is hidden in the milk. And when the milk is churned, the butter comes and it rises to the top. So when our consciousness is churned by experience, spiritual experience, and especially by yoga sadhana, the essence, the knowledge, rises up and comes into our conscious mind and comes up and is all here. Soham is the mantra of the Sahasrara chakra, the 1,000 petal lotus. And all the intelligence and the will is right here in the head. Gajanana Maharaj talks about this, that this is a very important thing to realize, that you orient toward the Sahasrara chakra, which doesn't mean you have to keep thinking about it. Oh, I've got to be aware of it. I've got to think about it. Let me think. Maybe I'll visualize something's rising up. Please, no. Do sadhana. Soham kevalam. Hold only to Soham. And it'll all come out right because you will attain that. You will attain that attainment, if you want to put it that way. And you see, I could describe experiences and things you'll find out about the energies of the bodies. Oh, yes, there is indeed the Ega, Ida, the Pila, the Sushumna. These yogis don't know but hardly 1/5 of 1/2 of 1% about their bodies. I mean, the tantrics themselves don't know hardly anything. The not yogis, the Soham yogis do know. And you'll experience for yourself, and you'll think, well, that's interesting. If you apply, and if you need it, and if you're the kind that's going to get distracted by it, then your higher mind, your true self, will say, okay, not right now. None of these experiences now. So be aware of that. What will make you wiser will come to you. What will not, which will just distract you, will, when you're doing the right sadhana, not come to you. And of course, as far as a Hindu or not Hindu, well, I'll tell you, there's only one way to enlightenment, and that's the path of yoga. And that's the path of the Sanatana Dharmis, those who follow what we call Hinduism. See, Hindu just means somebody that lives in the Indus Valley. So the word Hinduism is dumb because that would mean the religion just of the Indus Valley. India is a whole subcontinent. India used to rule the world. So therefore, it was a universal dharma at that time. So please don't believe this. Oh, there's a Westerner and there a Western mind, and there's an Eastern mind, and there's right brain and left brain. Eastern people are right brain, Western people are left brain, but they're all mixed in, and you can be right and left brain in degrees. And the truth is, an Oriental is someone who's predominantly right brain, and an Occidental is someone who is predominantly left brain. That's all there is to it. But please, let's not get into this. Well, if I'm not an Indian, what will it mean? I'm not saying that's what you think, but that's stupid too. Because it's like me saying, I'm sorry, I do not want to study Euclidean geometry because Euclid was a Greek and I'm not a Greek and I can't even speak Greek. And I don't know much about Greece and I don't know much about its history. So I'm not going to have a class of geometry. You'd think I was nuts, and you'd be right. I would be nuts. So, for example, it said Arabic numerals. That's what you're told, right? We take our math class. These are Arabic numerals. They are not. They're Sanskrit numbers. The Arabs learned it from India. And that's the truth. So, because you're a Westerner, will you quit using math because the numbers come from India? Will you not eat soup? Did you know soup's a Sanskrit word? We say, I mentioned about vir, a strength. Uh, Virility, we say, we're a real man. But this vir is a Sanskrit word. Most of our language has some Sanskrit roots to it. So If you think you can get away from Indian culture, from Indian civilization, well, you can go down and live in the Amazon rainforest and hunt animals with poisoned spears and darts if you like. But if you're an educated person, if you're a person of this contemporary world, you're not getting away from India at all, because India is there, because it's the fountainhead of all knowledge, including science. And that's the truth. There are several books that are sort of in the pipeline, and I'm really hoping for one called Sanatana Dharma, the Eternal Religion, that talks about the basic primary facts of life and evolution as it is seen in the terms of ancient India. And again, just because it was discovered there doesn't mean it doesn't apply to everybody. And people with open minds will, I think, benefit from it. Why were humans created, and why is it so hard to attain and release from birth cycles? Because we've fallen into ignorance and forgetfulness. Why were we created? Well, Brahma made the human body because here were these souls that needed to evolve. The truth is, they didn't start out as humans. We started out as an atom of hydrogen, and we came up all the way. Right here on this property, we're basically kind of a forest. And then we have lots of plants on the hillside. Every single plant is a jiva, an individual spirit that has spent a long time as atom of hydrogen and other things, and is now just that blade of grass. Oh, it'll take a long time. It'll take creation cycles. This creation will go and another will come back. It's all done mathematically. That I don't want to talk about that. When Sanatana Dharma comes out, you can read about it. But there are billions of living entities right now on this property, and they're all evolving upward. And they are, better word is manifested, because you understand everything is made out of energy, but then energy is seen to be consciousness. The essence of energy is consciousness. So it comes out. God is, if you want to say so, dreaming this whole thing, and you and I are having little dreams within God's dream. In God's dream, there's a place called Chicago, so you can dream you go to Chicago. And the sole purpose is your self realization. You can say, why did we need it? And why didn't we always have it? It's a very good question. I haven't the faintest idea, but you're here, you know. If suddenly you look around and you find you're sitting in a mud puddle, you may want to know why you're here and how you got here. But the first thing is to get up out of the mud. So the first thing is to elevate our consciousness, develop our consciousness, come to know who we are, to get some idea of why we are and where we really are and what is our real state. A lot of people, they mean it nicely and they mean respectfully, but they'll say to someone, oh, you're an old soul. But I have to confess to you that whenever people say that to me, I say yes, and I'm a stupid soul, because I shouldn't have still kept coming and coming around here for so long. I ought to be a young new soul who's ready to just step onto the next level, but I'm not. And it's hard to attain release because, first of all, we don't know we want it. We want freedom from suffering. That's not release. Real freedom, would we really like freedom? Would we like to suddenly be way beyond the body, way beyond all the things that is our daily life? It'd be better to evolve beyond it. Stay in them for a while, evolve. And it's hard to obtain release because people don't know the way. Let's say you're in a room and it's a secret door. So it just looks like walls. You don't know way out. You have to know the secret of the door. You have to know it's there. You have to know where it is. You see, if a person didn't understand locks and they were in a room and there was a door, it was locked, and there was even a key in the door, they just go up and say, well, I wonder what that's for, and let it fall on the floor. They'd never get out. So we have to know the way out, and yoga is the way out. Okay, what is japa? Japa is the continual repetition, mentally the most effective, though it can work if you speak aloud. But japa just means repetition. So it means, in the yogic sense, repetition of a mantra. What is a mantra? A mantra is a verbal form that produces a sound form or a sound configuration, an energy configuration, if you like that term, that produces a change. Because the word mantra comes from two words, mantra trayate, which means something that when you say it, it carries you over. Think of it, it's like a story. You're here on this side of the river, you want to get the other side, and you hear that woo woo wo will do it. You say woo woo yo, and bam, you're on the other side. Well, that's a fairy tale, but that's what a mantra is, and a mantra does. And essentially, that's it. It's a word of power. Mantras can accomplish anything. There was a man in India that had the power. Well, I met a man that had the power to neutralize cobra venom by a mantra. If a person was bit by a cobra and he was nearby, he'd come, he would touch them, and he'd recite the mantra, and they'd be all right. And but cobras reacted to him. He could go into a jungle and want to see the cobras, and he would come. And he had these abilities. Well, there was a man that had tremendous power like this, and they called him Poison King. I'm sure he must be long departed from the world by now. But he had a really interesting power that the government of India would send free. They said anyone could go to a telegraph office and send the name of someone bit by a poisonous snake, especially a cobra, and the free of charge they would send the telegram on to him. He lived in a little village somewhere, and they had their own post office with the telegraph, and so he'd be walking along or doing things, and he carried a towel over one shoulder. And so they come to him with a telegram, and they see the person's name. And he would, I don't know if he incorporated their name in the mantra. The person who knew him never told me this. But anyway, he would reach up and he would just tear a little strip off of that towel. And as he tore it off, he would recite a mantra. I don't know if it was aloud or mentally. And instantly, the person would be all right. And as long as the years he lived, this happened. As I said, I met this man. He had these powers. I can tell you something interesting. He one time was being taken, by someone in their car through the streets of Delhi, and he passed one of the main hospitals. And they were carrying out a body and they were putting it on the roof of a taxi. They were going to take it home, and it was somewhat wrapped around. His intuition told him that person was not dead. So he said, "Stop, pull in there." So he got out and he said to the people, this man isn't dead. They said, "Well, he's been declared dead by the doctors. He was bitten by a cobra, and then by the time we got him here, he was dead." He said, "Let me see what I can do." And he just went up and he touched the body and he said the mantra. And in a short while, the man began to move and he was alive. And the good thing about this was that doctors were scientists, of course, even though they were Indians and their ancestors knew better. They had come to believe in the superstitions of Western science. So he couldn't have been dead and come back to life. And they brought him in, and the doctors that gave the certificate after examining him refused to rescind the death certificate. So he remained legally dead. He never had to pay any taxes from then on. So his family was quite satisfied with it. But you see the bigotry, the ignorance of science, the ignorance of knowledge. What is outside is a dream. What is inside is real. When you can look at the outside with the eyes of the inside, then you really see what is there. And you see what matters. And ultimately, nothing matters but your self realization. Consciousness and unity with God. Well, consciousness is itself an experience and a thing. We don't know how to explain it, Chaitanya, but it is. And we're all living in God and one with God at this very moment, who is also absolute consciousness. But our consciousness is separated off. Think of fruit falling off a tree. It's not a very good simile, but whatever. And we've lost connection and we don't remember. But there are people that have amnesia for years, and then one day, boom, they remember, and they remember everything. And then, well, they're amazed. Of course, the others around them are amazed. So it's forgetfulness. We are asleep and dreaming. If you want to, somebody gave us a sleeping potion or a drug and they knocked us out. And now we kind of wake up and it's, where am I? And why am I is as much an important question as where am I? So we've come here to wake up. We've come here to get out. Why do you go to school? So you graduate, so you get out. Think of a hell of the school. How would you like to go to school all your life? Remember those mean, horrible women that all said, if I didn't like children, I wouldn't become a school teacher. Do you remember that? Do you remember the principal? Yes, wouldn't we like to have it? How to relate to body sensations during meditation, both pleasant and constrictive, painful. Thank you. Okay, don't relate to them. You're aware of them. You stay with awareness of your breath, the intonation of soul when you breathe, and hum when you out breathe. Just stay with that. That's all you need. Then, whatever you feel bodily doesn't mean anything because there's a purpose and an end for it. And if you don't know the end, and if you don't already know how to use the knowledge of the end, then don't bother. Be aware, experience, yes. Listen to your inner intonations of Soham and feel what you do feel when you do it, but don't be like you're at it, like a cat at a mouse hole. Just be aware. What you feel. What you don't feel, you don't feel. You don't know what it is you need to feel. So just experience, but don't ever get caught up in the experience and forget the japa. See, don't lose the cause by getting involved with the effect and forgetting the cause, because you're the cause. And it's really arising from you. You've decided at last to go home. Therefore, the only thing you need is awareness of your breath, awareness of the sound, and yes, be aware of the reactions. But never try to control it, never try to hold on to it, and don't put a value judgment on, oh, that's good, that's not good. Because, you can drink something and say, boy, that tastes great, and then fall dead because there was poison inside of it. So just the like, dislike, pleasure, pain of something has nothing to do with its real nature and with its desirability. So you just let that happen and you stay with Soham. Memories will come up. Yes, ideas will come up. Of course. You'll itch. Okay, if you itch right there, just keep your eyes closed. Stay with Soham. Okay, scratch, for heaven's sakes. There are the people who say, oh, if you're a real yogi, you just sit there. It doesn't matter if you get a cricket in your neck. They're not yogis. They're gymnasts, and they're ignorant gymnasts. So, yes, go like this if you need to. It doesn't matter. Shift around. That's all right. Stick your legs out in front of you if they go to sleep. But stay with the sadhana process. This is what you have to do. And what will happen to you if you persevere? First of all, if you can put it in words, it's pretty low level. But it can be a real experience, but it's pretty low level because all of our vocabulary comes from the five senses. You see? Now, I have meditations that feel like I'm undergoing brain surgery. I mean, seriously. It's not unpleasant. It doesn't bother me. And don't let it distract me. I let myself be absorbed in the Soham, the breath, the sound of Soham, and the doing of it. But it's pretty impressive. I've had some rather interesting experiences. Like, for example, I twice came across an English translation of Sanskrit. One was Shankara work. I can't remember the other one. And don't ask me why they made a difference in the type. But in both of them, like in the middle of a sentence, like where it wouldn't belong, or between two sentences where it didn't seem to belong, in capital letters it said, Soham Hamsa. You'll hear, no, don't say Soham, say Hamsa. That's, you say hum when you breathe in, sa when you breathe out. Nope, that's not the way to go, but if you want to do it, go ahead, try. And I thought, what's this here for? It's right out in the middle. It means nothing. But I say after, I'm not sure, 2, 3, 4 months of Soham sadhana, a few hours a day. Wow, did I really discover what it meant. And I realized it's a yogic test because Shankara was a Soham yogi. He was a not yogi. And he just plopped these words in there so that when this experience happened, you would remember you'd read those words and you'd know, wow, that's what it meant. But that means that whoever wrote those words knew that those who practice like you're doing will get that experience. So it's a proof that you're on the right track. Yes, indeed. But don't try to figure it, work it out, but just stay with that. You cannot imagine what you have. You will discover what speech means, the power of speech, the faculty of speech, the mutations of sound. And they'll all just be incidents along the way, but they're good to have happen because you know you're on the way. But It is really amazing. And my every meditation I have amazes me. Some are bigger amazes than other, but they are amazing. It's amazing what you feel. You understand? Ananda is what you're after, but not like, oh, that's not Ananda. But sukha, ease, quiet, peace, like is unimaginable. All this happens, and sometimes, yes, you may see things. You see, Gajanana Maharaj used to have people sit in front of him when they were beginning, and he'd say, "Okay, now meditate." And they do, and they have all these visions and amazing things, and hear astral sounds, and see gods and goddesses, and so on and so on and so on. And maybe he'd have him do it a few days in a row, and then one day it wouldn't happen. He'd say, "Now you're going to make progress. All that before was not progress. There was some scars coming out. Okay, you've cleared them out. Now you're going to experience the real thing." Or he'd put his hand on their head and they would have these experiences. But always he would say, "You're not making progress until all that stops." But some of these inner things and inner sensations and other things, well, they do happen to you. But they don't matter. All that matters is Soham Kevalam, only Soham. Because you're that. So that's knowing yourself. You're going to enter into your true consciousness by practicing Soham sadhana. This is a very broad question, which I think is the last question. How should I conduct myself in daily activities? Well, first of all, in the light of your experiences of meditation. If you're not meditating, who cares? It's just more part of the dream, more part of the fever, more part of the hallucination. If you want to know, you should go to ocoy.org website, look up Niyama. There's Foundations of Yoga. It's a booklet I've written. You can download it. Foundations of Yoga. It's what you have to succeed in yoga. Like if you build a house right on the ground, ultimately it's going to fall in. You've got to have foundation. And that will give you an idea how to conduct yourself. And then, uh, again, yama and niyama, it talks about important things. You have to speak truth. Ahimsa, non-injury. You have to not harm anyone or anything. And so, and it goes through there. And you can read various books that have to do with the fundamentals of Indian philosophy. As I say, Sanatana Dharma will hopefully come out in not too long time. So we've come to the end of the extra questions. And it's before the time, but thank you very much for listening. And I hope I've been clear in what I had to say. And from now on, it's all you.